At my husband's funeral, I received a voicemail from him. "Honey, I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Especially our children. They call me Dorothy, but everyone who ever mistook me for fragile learned to say dot in a hurry. At 62, I have a knee that clicks like a metronome and a laugh that scares pigeons. And when my husband's coffin slid behind the velvet curtain at St. Bartholomew's, I did not cry. I watched. I've learned that tears, like coupons, are worthless if you hand them to the wrong cashier. The sanctuary smelled like lilies and old books, which matched the men who eulogized Henry. Lily-scented grief, hard-bound platitudes. My son sat 2 pews ahead with his wife, Nora. Her neon manicure a small lighthouse any time she touched her hair. My daughter, Em, who had been too busy to call me back the week before, wore sunglasses indoors like a Hollywood widow and posted a filtered selfie from the church steps between the priest's homily and the closing hymn. I saw it later. #blessed. The choir started "Nearer, My God, to Thee," and my phone buzzed. I don't keep sound on in church even when God and I aren't speaking, so it was just a small tremor in my handbag. I let it go once. Twice. The third time that bag was shaking like a soda can. I slipped it open with the delicacy you use for a sleeping cat and slid the phone out beneath the pew. One voicemail. Unknown number. I pressed it to my ear because when you've been a mother long enough, you can hear a hospital in a ringtone. What I heard was my husband's voice. "I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Especially our children." 7 words and a betrayal I could taste. My fingers went cold. I looked up, and as if God were an improv comedian, the curtain swallowed Henry's coffin. Well, I thought, either the resurrection came early and forgot to loop in the Pope, or I'm being played. The thing about shock is it's like static. It can make you deaf, or it can make everything suddenly painfully clear. I tucked the phone away, squared my shoulders, and sang the rest of the hymn in a voice that made the altos look over. After the service, people hugged me like I was a vending machine and they were guaranteed a snack of comfort if they pressed long enough. Em kissed my cheek and whispered, "Mom will take care of you," in the tone she used the time she took care of my favorite silk blouse with the ironing board. My son Tyler squeezed my hand and did his best earnest young father face. He'd perfected it for mortgage applications. "Mom, listen," he said, steering me toward the church garden where the roses were sulking in late September heat. "You shouldn't be alone right now. Pack a bag, come stay with us for a while. We'll sort everything out." Nora hovered behind him, nodding. She's the kind of woman who says she loves vintage and then buys distressed furniture new. "It'll be cozy," she said. "I'll make the guest room nice. The girls will love having Grandma close." Our grandchildren, Maddie and June, were busy making confetti out of the memorial program behind the hydrangeas. Maddie is a natural-born lawyer. You can see the cross-examination forming in her eyes as soon as you tell her no. June prefers anarchy. They are why I still believe in the future. Because it looks you dead in the face and says, "Watch me." I could have confronted them then, about the voicemail, about the sudden urgency, about the way Em's planner lay open in her handbag with "estate" urgent scrawled across it like a ransom note. But you don't play your ace on the appetizer. You smile, let people assume your teeth are for decoration, and you wait for the entree. "All right," I said. "For a little while." The wake was the usual crash of casseroles, tears, and men who use grief as an excuse to tell you Henry's college stories they promised they'd never tell. I nodded. I collected plates. I tucked a lasagna in the freezer that could legally vote. And when the house finally emptied, when the casseroles huddled like sleeping seals on the counter, I listened to that voicemail again. "I'm alive," Henry said, with that half-chuckle that always made me want to smack him and kiss him. "Don't trust anyone. Especially our children." I stared at the sink, at my own face in the window above it. The porch light behind me made a ghost of me in the glass. I reached for the landline, dialed the number back. Disconnected. I tried *69 like it was 1999. No luck. I played the message again, hunted for a clue in the background, traffic, TV, gulls, anything. All I could hear was wind and Henry breathing. By morning I had a suitcase packed and a plan stitched together from common sense and suspicion. Tyler and Nora fetched me in their SUV that smells like juice boxes and new debt. They moved me into their suburban 2-story with the same careful cheer you use for a skittish horse. In the guest room, Nora had placed a candle labeled "Peaceful Linen." which is a scent invented for people who don't do their own laundry. The first week, everyone was sugar. Tyler carried my suitcase. Nora insisted I relax, put my feet up, try her herbal tea that tastes like boiled lawn. Em stayed every evening, patting my hand conspicuously whenever she steered the conversation back to the house. "It's so big for just you, Mom," she'd say, eyes soft. "Maybe we should think about downsizing. Less to worry about. And think of the taxes," Tyler would add, solemn as an undertaker. "Property taxes are just cruel." "God's little subscription service," I said, and sipped my tea. "Exactly," Em said, relieved. "So we could help. Just temporarily. Power of attorney just to smooth things and we can look at offers. The market's hot." I laughed. Surprised all of us, including me. "I got married in 1983, sweetheart. I have danced with disco. I have survived perms and low-fat everything. I can survive a few bills." Em's smile shrank, but she rallied. "Of course. Just think about it. We want what's best for you." What I thought about was that message and the way Tyler's knee bounced when I asked him how work was. The man has never met a spreadsheet he couldn't charm, until lately. "Ups and downs," he said, and changed the subject to Maddie's soccer team. Nora, who is clever in the way interior designers are, good at hiding bones under pretty rugs, kept offering to help with the paperwork for the house. "Just put the bills here," she said, setting a basket on my bedside table. "I'll run them through our system. Direct debit. So you don't have to think about it." "Honey," I said, "thinking is my last vice." 3 weeks in, the tone shifted. Sugar doesn't keep. Nora started sighing when I used the fancy olive oil. Tyler began to ask how long for a little while meant. Em called less, texted more, all business. "Did you sign the forms? Doc needs them." I read the paperwork. Power of attorney, authorization to handle the sale, in Mom's best interest. Cute language like a wolf in a knit sweater. I signed nothing. I smiled a lot. I cleaned up after myself with the efficiency of a woman who has lived with men. I FaceTimed the girls after school and taught them how to plant avocado pits in jars. I checked the balance of the joint account Henry and I had used for groceries. Something small had been nibbling at it. Tiny withdrawals, 30 here, 60 there, from an app one didn't recognize. I traced it. Em's idea of subtlety, bless her heart, is a glitter sneaker in a library. At the end of the 3rd month, a Tuesday dressed up as the apocalypse, Nora was waiting at the kitchen table with her nails the color of a stop sign. Tyler stood beside her with his hands in his pockets like pocket convictions. The girls were at school. The house smelled like coffee and decision. "Mom," Tyler began, and his voice was so careful I could hear the warning beeps. "We've made a plan." Nora slid a folder across the table. "It's better for everyone," she said. "We found a buyer for your house. Amazing offer. Cash. No inspections. You'll be free of the upkeep. You can stay here with us, just help with utilities, and when the dust settles we'll figure out a little place for you, something manageable." My palms went cold. "You found a buyer for my house," I repeated. Tyler swallowed. "We expedited things. It was time-sensitive." "Because you were in a hurry," I said. "And because you had power of attorney." "Temporarily," Nora said quickly. "Just for efficiency since you hadn't been up to it. Grief is hard." I looked them both in the eye and smiled my smallest, sharpest smile. "Grief is hard," I said. "So is arithmetic." They didn't like that. Tyler's jaw did a little dance. Nora's nostrils flared like tiny umbrellas. "We have to be practical," she said. "Family should help family. I mean, we took you in." "Yes," I said. "And what an investment you've made." Tyler pushed his chair back, knocking it into the counter. "Don't be unfair, Mom," he said. "We're doing what needs to be done. We put the proceeds into a holding account. Em's managing it. To keep it safe. For you." "For me," I said, and thought of Henry's voice. "Don't trust anyone. Especially our children." That afternoon, while Nora took a meeting in her athleisure and Tyler pretended to work in the den, I walked 3 blocks to my house. My house, where the azaleas I planted with Henry when Reagan was still on the evening news had grown into a pink rumor across the porch. There was a sign in the yard. It did not say for sale. It said sold. A ribbon flapped from the post like a cheap parade. A delivery truck idled in the driveway. A woman I didn't know appeared on the porch, jangling a set of keys. "Can I help you?" she asked brightly. "Yes," I said, tasting metal. "You can tell me who bought my life." "Oh." She laughed, glittering with cashmere and confidence. "We did. Closed yesterday. Such a steal in this market." The agent said the seller was motivated. Motivated. That word again. Motivated like a wolf at a sheep conference. "Congratulations," I said, because sometimes the only weapon you have left is manners sharper than knives. I turned away before she could ask another question and walked back past the school where the afternoon bell was ringing. Children spilled onto the sidewalk, a river of noise. I thought of Maddie and June's faces, sticky with popsicle, earnest with questions. I thought of the voicemail I kept replaying like a hymn. And I thought of the hotel I'd passed on the corner of Elm and Ridge, its vacancy sign buzzing, the way a fly gets mean when it's trapped. That night I packed my bag, counted what I had left. 2,000 and a few bruises you can't photograph. Before I left, Nora handed me a grocery sack. "You can take these," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We need the room." Inside, 2 t-shirts, a travel-size shampoo, and a Bible. I almost laughed. At the door, Tyler kissed my forehead the way he did when he was 5 and I bandaged his knee. "We'll be in touch," he said, and closed the door softly, like I was a sleeping dog he didn't want to wake. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and something burning faint and far. I walked to the hotel on Elm, paid $43 cash for a room that stank of rat poison and old regrets, and set my suitcase on the bedspread with the pattern of seaweed and cereal. I sat on the edge of that bed and listened to Henry's message one more time. "I'm alive," he said. "Don't trust anyone. Especially our children." "All right, Henry," I said to the peeling wallpaper. "Message received. But if you are alive, you've got competition. Because grief may flatten you, but it also clears the clutter." In the silence that followed, I could hear my own engine turning over. The girls would not remember their grandmother as a tragic footnote. Em and Tyler would not be the last authors of my story. And tomorrow morning, I would not wake up in this room again. At least not without a plan to turn every cheap thing that had happened to me into something that made a profit. I set my alarm for 5. I made a list on the back of the motel receipt. Call the number again. Check the courthouse filings. Visit the nursery on Maple. Find work that pays in cash and hope. When the pen stopped, the list looked like a blueprint. I fell asleep to the train whistle sound of traffic, and I dreamed of windows filled with green winter gardens under glass, warmth in a season that had no right to promise it. In the morning, I woke before the alarm and opened the motel curtains. The sun was coming up mean and bright like me. On my phone, a new voicemail icon blinked. Unknown number. I pressed play, heart steady. Static. Then a voice I didn't recognize, low, careful. "Mrs. Rhodes? If you're interested in work, be at the estate on Harper Lane at 7. We pay fair and we pay fast. Ask for Rafe." I smiled. The universe, it turns out, tips well if you carry your own tray. And I laced up my shoes. I showed up at Harper Lane before sunrise, the mist still curling off the lawns like cigarette smoke. The estate was one of those sprawling mansions that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. Tall iron gates, gravel drive that whispered secrets under your shoes, and a house with more windows than the town library. For a woman with $43 worth of rat poison perfume clinging to her hotel room, it was like stepping into another country. A man in boots and a jacket the color of wet bark met me at the gate. He was tall, scar on his chin, eyes sharp as if he'd already measured my worth and found it acceptable. "You Dorothy?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Rafe. You're early." "Early is on time when you're broke," I told him, and he barked a laugh. He led me around the side, where a half-dead rose garden sulked against the frost. "Client wants this turned into a winter garden," Rafe explained. "Glass house over it, irrigation, heating, the works. You any good with plants?" "I kept 2 kids alive, 3 if you count my husband. Plants are easier, they don't talk back." That won me a grin. "Good. Show me what you do with this mess." I knelt down, pushed my fingers into the soil. It was dry, neglected, but beneath the crust was promise. I began talking about soil amendments, about layered planting for year-round interest, about climbing jasmine to perfume the glasshouse, lemon trees in tubs for winter fruit, ferns for softness. My words painted pictures, and by the time I stood, Rafe was staring like I'd conjured Eden out of gravel. "You're hired," he said simply. "Cash at the end of the week." That first week I worked like I was 20 again. Hauling soil, sketching designs, scrubbing my hands raw. Each night I dragged myself back to that sour-smelling hotel, peeled off my mud-stiff jeans, and counted my pay like it was treasure. $400 cash. It smelled better than Chanel. Word spread faster than mildew. One estate owner told another, and soon I was booked back to back. I learned to barter my wit for loyalty. Make the rich laugh and they'll trust you with their orchids. I stitched my pride back together one client at a time. By the end of the second month I was pulling in $8,000. More than I'd ever handled without Henry managing the ledgers. And Henry, well, I still had that voicemail tucked away like a thorn under my skin. I tried tracing it, asking favors, even showed it to Rafe once. He frowned, said it could be a spoof, could be real. "You want me to look into it?" he offered. I shook my head. If the dead want to come back, they'll find their own way. By the 6th month I had 30 clients. My notebook was filled with appointments, sketches, and numbers that kept me awake at night. Not with fear but with the giddy disbelief of a woman who'd been declared obsolete and then rewrote her obituary herself. I traded the hotel for a small rental, then signed papers on a house that made my old one look like a starter kit. White columns, a porch wide enough for dancing, land enough for a dozen gardens. The day I turned the key in the door, I stood in the echoing foyer and whispered, "Beat that, Henry." But of course the ghosts don't clap. 4 years passed in a blink of soil and glass. Then one crisp afternoon, a knock rattled my door. I opened it and there they were, Tyler and Nora, their faces drawn, their designer coats worn at the elbows. Between them stood Maddie and June, taller now, eyes cautious but curious. "Mom," Tyler said, voice hoarse, "we need to talk." Behind him, Nora's mouth pinched like a purse she'd lost the key to. But I didn't look at them. I crouched to meet my granddaughter's eyes. "Well, if it isn't my favorite gardeners," I said. "Do you know, I've got a lemon tree in the sunroom that could use some helpers?" They giggled, soft but real. In front of their parents I told them the truth, that 4 years ago, their father and mother had thrown me out with nothing but a grocery sack and a Bible. Tyler flinched. Nora hissed. But Maddie's eyes widened, June's little chin jutted forward. And I knew truth has roots. "Now," I said, standing tall, "as for you two," I nodded at Tyler and Nora, "there's no room in this house for you. But these girls, they're welcome any day, every day. They'll know their grandmother isn't a ghost you erased." Tyler's lips trembled. "Mom, please. We've lost everything. The bank." "I warned you once," I said, voice steel. "You didn't listen. Now you'll learn what survival looks like." Behind me my house glowed with the scent of green things thriving. And somewhere deep in my phone that old voicemail waited, still whispering that Henry was alive. The thing about survival is it makes you greedy for answers. And I wasn't done yet. After I sent Tyler and Nora packing, the silence of my big new house was sweeter than a hymn sung in key. The girls had hugged me. Awkwardly at first, then with the kind of squeeze that tells you they don't want to let go. That was my victory. You see, children grow up fast, but they don't forget who showed them kindness when the world was stingy. I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat on the porch, watching the sun slide down behind the trees. My phone was on the table, face up. That cursed little voicemail icon still haunted it like a scar that never fades. 4 years and no new word from Henry. Just that one message. "I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Especially our children." Sometimes I'd play it at night the way some folks play lullabies. Not because it comforted me, but because it reminded me who I was dealing with. My children had stripped me bare, but I had turned ashes into a damn greenhouse. Still the mystery gnawed at me. If Henry was alive, why hadn't he come back? Why hadn't he called again? I hired a private investigator once. Paid him a fat envelope of cash because I wanted no paper trail. He came back 2 weeks later smelling of bourbon and excuses. Said the number had bounced through international towers, Mexico maybe. Could be real, could be a prank, he shrugged. I fired him on the spot. A woman who builds empires out of dirt does not pay for shrugs. Instead, I doubled down on living. My winter garden company bloomed like a second youth. 30 clients became 40, then 50. I hired a crew, 3 women who'd been scraping by cleaning houses. I trained them myself. This isn't just gardening, I told them. This is resurrection. We make dead corners bloom. They caught on quick, and soon folks were waiting months to book us. Money flowed. Real money, the kind that made the bank clerks start calling me Mrs. Rhodes again with crisp voices. I bought myself a truck, fire engine red, with a flatbed for hauling soil. Nothing says don't underestimate me. Like pulling up to a mansion in a red truck with your name stenciled on the door. But success has a way of echoing. Tyler and Nora weren't the only ones who noticed. Word drifted back that my daughter, was asking around about my finances. She and her husband had sunk themselves into debt, chasing some scheme in Florida. She's doing well, isn't she? People overheard her say, her tone the kind of casual that's never casual. I braced myself. Children smell opportunity like foxes smell blood. One evening, just as I'd finished supper, there was a knock on the door. Not Tyler this time, but Em. Her hair was brittle, her smile stretched thin. She held a pie she'd clearly bought at the grocery store. Thought I'd stop by, Mom, she said, stepping into my foyer like she still had the deed. I let her talk, let her spin the story about how life had been so tough, and how we've missed you. Then, like slipping a knife between ribs, she said, maybe we could invest together? You've got the clients, I've got the connections. Connections? I raised an eyebrow. Yes. There are people in Miami who'd pay triple for luxury winter gardens. You and we could build something big. I laughed so loud the pie box rattled in her hands. Honey, I already built something big. And I did it without a single connection except my own 2 hands. Her smile cracked. So you're just going to shut me out? You shut me out first, I said simply. She didn't stay long. The pie sat on my counter untouched. I ended up feeding it to the birds the next morning. Even they picked at it suspiciously. But here's the thing. That night, as I stood at the sink rinsing out my wine glass, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I froze. My heart thudded like a bass drum. With shaking fingers I pressed play. Static. Then faint like a whisper dragged through gravel. Don't stop. Mexico, trust no one. It was Henry. Again. I dropped the glass right into the sink, shards flying. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, wild-eyed, grinning, ready for battle. All right, Henry, I whispered to the night. If you're out there, you'd better be worth all this trouble. Because I've got a business to run, children to outsmart, and now a breadcrumb trail to follow. I cleaned up the glass, swept the floor, and packed a bag. Tomorrow I decided I'd call Rafe. A woman may be able to resurrect herself alone, but chasing ghosts? That requires a partner with a good pair of boots. And if Henry was alive in Mexico, then my story was just beginning to get interesting. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of energy that makes people suspicious. I brewed my coffee strong, black as sin, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the slip of paper where I'd scribbled last night's words. Don't stop. Mexico, trust no one. Mexico. I hadn't been there since my 20s, when Henry and I drove down in a beat-up station wagon for a honeymoon that cost us more in car repairs than in margaritas. We'd slept on the beach once. Sand in our hair, ocean in our ears, and he'd promised me then that he'd never let me feel alone in this world. Well, so much for promises. I called Rafe. Meet me at the nursery, I said. You sound like a woman with a plan, he replied. I sound like a woman who's tired of being lied to, I shot back. We met by the rows of camellias, the air heavy with their perfume. Rafe leaned against a wheelbarrow, arms crossed. So what's the job? I need to find someone, I said. And I think he's in Mexico. His eyebrows rose, but he didn't laugh. That's not landscaping. No, I said. That's survival. I played the voicemail for him, watched his jaw tighten. That's your husband? Supposedly buried, yes. And your kids know? I barked a laugh. If they knew, I'd already be in a shallow grave myself. He rubbed his chin. You want me to go with you? I nodded. I can build gardens, Rafe. But if Henry really is alive down there, then this is going to take more than potting soil and good intentions. We didn't leave right away. I had clients, commitments. A woman's reputation is like a garden. You neglect it, weeds take over. For 3 weeks I worked like a demon, finishing projects, billing invoices, setting my crew up to run without me for a while. Night I planned. Flights, hotels, contacts. Meanwhile, Tyler and Nora were circling. They sent me letters, emails, even a handwritten note from Maddie that smelled suspiciously like Nora's perfume. Please, Grandma, can we visit? Mommy says you don't like us anymore. It made my blood boil. Children should never be pawns in grown-up games. I wrote back directly to Maddie in June. My house is always open to you. Anytime, any day. No conditions. Love, Grandma. No reply came. I suspected the letter never reached them. By the time Rafe and I booked flights, I felt lighter than I had in years. Adventure does that, it strips you down to something younger, sharper. At the airport I wore jeans, boots, and a denim jacket with deep pockets. Rafe carried one duffel, no nonsense. We'll keep it simple, he said. If your husband's alive, we'll find him. The plane dipped over the Yucatan like a silver gull, and my heart rattled in my chest. The last time I'd been here I was a bride. Now I was a widow chasing a ghost. We landed in Cancun, heat hitting us like a slap. Tourists in straw hats shuffled toward buses headed for resorts. We went the other way, out the back toward the rental jeeps. The first few days were a blur of dusty roads, small villages, questions asked in halting Spanish. Tall American? Middle-aged? Scar on his cheek? Most people shook their heads. One old man in Merida spat and muttered, "See low 6. He pointed toward the coast. Rafe and I drove for hours past mangroves and crumbling haciendas. At night, we stayed in roadside inns where the air smelled of salt and old plaster. I kept my phone by my bed, waiting for another message that never came. Then, on the fourth night, it did. Unknown number. I pressed play with trembling hands. Close. Don't bring anyone. Trust only yourself. Cabo. Cabo. I sat on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Rafe watched me, unreadable. Well, he asked. He knows I'm here, I whispered. And he doesn't want me along. I looked him dead in the eye. If Henry thinks he can order me around after faking his own death, he's got another thing coming. I didn't build an empire just to play damsel. You're staying with me. Rafe smiled then, slow and wolfish. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. We packed at dawn. The road to Cabo was long, and so was the list of questions I had for my not-so-dead husband. Because if Henry really was alive, hiding in Mexico all these years, then he owed me more than a voicemail. He owed me answers. The drive to Cabo was a ribbon of heat and dust, hours of desert where the horizon shimmered like it was laughing at us. Rafe handled the Jeep like he'd been born with sand under his tires, while I sat with my notebook open, scribbling down every detail of the messages. Don't bring anyone. Trust only yourself. Sounds like a man who knows he's made a mess, Rafe muttered, eyes on the road. Sounds like a man who still thinks he's in charge. I shot back. He fakes his death, lets me bury him, lets his own children gut me like a fish, and now he's issuing instructions? He's lucky I don't hunt him down with a frying pan. Rafe chuckled. Remind me not to get on your bad side. We reached Cabo late afternoon, sunlight spilling gold over the Pacific. Tourists crowded the marina, all sandals and cocktails, but I wasn't there for margaritas. I scanned the faces, every man with graying hair making my heart skip before reality knocked it back into rhythm. We checked into a modest hotel. Tile floors, salt air through the window. That night I dreamed Henry was standing at the foot of my bed, whispering, "Don't trust them," over and over, until the words dissolved into waves. The next morning Rafe and I split up. He worked the docks, chatting with fishermen, while I strolled the markets, asking carefully. American man, older, maybe hiding? Some shrugged, some laughed. One woman narrowed her eyes and said, Cabo San Lucas is full of men hiding, senora. By noon we met back at the hotel. Rafe had news. One of the fishermen said there's an American who keeps to himself, rents a shack up the coast, pays in cash, shows up for supplies once a week. My chest tightened. Describe him. Gray hair, scar on his cheek, walks with a limp. It was him. It had to be. We drove north, the coast wild and jagged, waves hammering the rocks like war drums. The shack was barely more than driftwood nailed together, set back from the sand dunes. My throat went dry. I stepped out of the Jeep, the air sharp with salt and cactus bloom. Every instinct screamed to run to the door, but I forced myself to walk slow, steady. Rafe hung back, hands in his pockets. The door creaked open before I reached it, and there he was. Henry. Older, leaner, his beard streaked white, but those eyes, the same blue that had once convinced me to marry him in a courthouse with wilted daisies on the desk. "Dot," he rasped. I should have run into his arms. Instead, I slapped him. Hard enough to sting my own palm. "You let me bury you," I hissed. "You let me lose everything. You let our children," my voice broke. "And you left me with a voicemail." Henry touched his cheek, then had the gall to smile rueful. "I deserved that. You deserve worse." Rafe cleared his throat behind me. Henry's gaze darted past me, wary. "Who's this?" "A friend," I snapped. "The only one who didn't betray me." Henry shook his head slowly. "Dot, I told you not to bring anyone. It's not safe." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Safe? You've been hiding in a shack while I've been living in rat poison hotels and clawing my way back to life. Don't you dare talk to me about safe." He looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him, shoulders heavy with something I couldn't yet name. "Tyler," he whispered. "It was Tyler. He threatened me. Said if I didn't disappear, he'd—" Henry trailed off, eyes wet. "He said he'd make sure you paid." I staggered back, the world tilting. My own son. Behind me, Rafe stepped closer, steady as a tree. "Tell her everything," he said quietly. Henry nodded. "I will. But not here. They're still watching." The waves crashed, gulls screamed, and the ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid. My son had driven my husband into hiding, and I had some choices to make. I stared at Henry like he'd sprouted horns. "Tyler? My Tyler? The boy who used to drag his blanket across the floor to crawl into our bed when thunder shook the windows? The boy I fed, clothed, defended through every playground spat and teenage tantrum? You're telling me," I said slowly, "that our son threatened you into disappearing?" Henry rubbed his beard, his eyes bloodshot from too many years of hiding. "He found out things, Dot. Things about money I'd moved, accounts I never told you about. He said if I didn't vanish, he'd ruin us both." "Ruin us?" I barked out a laugh that wasn't funny. "Henry, I was already ruined. Do you know what it's like to bury a man who's still breathing? To watch your children sell your house out from under you? To sleep in a hotel that stinks like a crime scene because you've got nothing left? Don't talk to me about ruin." Rafe shifted beside me, arms crossed, silent but coiled like a spring. Henry's eyes flicked to him again. "And you brought muscle," he muttered. "Don't flatter yourself," I snapped. "I brought a friend who doesn't vanish when the going gets rough." For a moment, none of us spoke. Just the waves pounding relentless against the rocks. Finally, Henry sighed, shoulders sagging. "Come inside. I'll explain." The shack was sparse, bedroll, chip table, a cooler that hummed like it was running on borrowed time. On the table lay a battered notebook. Henry slid it toward me. Every account. Every transfer. Everything Tyler found out. I flipped it open. Numbers, banks, dates. Some overseas, some stateside. My head spun. "You were hiding money?" "Not hiding. Protecting," Henry said. "I didn't trust the kids. You saw what they did with your house. I was trying to make sure there'd be something left for you." My laugh this time was sharp as glass. "Well, mission accomplished. I got left, all right." Rafe leaned against the wall, his eyes on Henry. "So the kid threatened you. Why didn't you come to your wife? Why not tell her the truth?" Henry's gaze fell. "Because I thought if you believed I was dead, they'd leave you alone. That you'd be safer." "Safer?" I nearly hurled the notebook at his head. "Safer? Henry, I was homeless. Do you know what I did to survive? I scrubbed dirt with my bare hands until they bled. I built a business from ashes. I clawed back my dignity with nothing but a shovel and spite." He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time in years I saw the man I married shame etched deep. "You've always been stronger than me," he whispered. "Don't you dare romanticize it," I said, my voice trembling. "I shouldn't have had to be." Silence again. Then Henry's hand trembled as he pushed another scrap of paper across the table. "A phone number. U.S. code. He still calls. Checks if I'm alive. Reminds me to stay gone. He thinks I'm scared of him. Rafe's jaw tightened. Maybe it's time we remind him he's not the only one who can play dirty. I picked up that scrap of paper, held it like a live coal. My son's number. Proof that Henry's story wasn't just a fable spun from guilt. And for the first time since I buried an empty coffin, I felt something hot and dangerous stirring in my chest. Not grief. Not despair. Vengeance. I slid the paper into my pocket. All right then, I said. If Tyler thinks he can blackmail his own father and ruin his own mother, he's about to learn what family really means. Henry blinked. What are you going to do? I stood, my shadow long in the fading light. I'm going to remind my son who raised him. And I'm going to do it in a way he'll never forget. Rafe gave me a slow, approving nod. Now we're talking. Henry swallowed, pale. Don't hurt him. I turned, eyes sharp. That depends on whether he deserves hurting. Outside, the waves roared like applause. I didn't sleep that night. The shack groaned in the wind, and Henry's snoring rattled the tin roof, but my eyes stayed wide open. I lay on the cot, staring at shadows crawling across the ceiling, replaying Tyler's voice in my head. Checks if I'm alive. Reminds me to stay gone. My son, my own flesh and blood, had turned into a wolf circling the weakest of the herd. Trouble was, he'd miscalculated. I wasn't weak. I was the woman who could make weeds bloom and rats scatter. At dawn I shook Rafe awake. We're going back. To the States? He asked, sitting up, hair sticking out like cactus needles. Yes. To my son. Henry tried to protest. If you confront him, he'll just... I cut him off with a glare. He'll just what? Try to ruin me again? Take my house? He already did that once and I came back bigger. If Tyler wants war, he picked the wrong general. Rafe grinned, pulling on his boots. Thought you'd say that. We left Henry with a burner phone, strict orders to stay put. He looked like a man half drowned, clutching driftwood. Please, he said as we climbed into the Jeep. Don't destroy him. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is scarier than words. Back home the seasons had turned. My house glowed with autumn light, the garden rich with color. I'd built a kingdom while Henry rotted in exile, and now I was going to defend it. The first thing I did was dial the number Henry gave me. My hand shook but my voice didn't. Hello. Tyler's voice groggy. Hello, son, I said sweetly. Guess who? Silence. Then sharp. Mom? How did you? Oh, don't play dumb. You know exactly what I know. And now I want to see you. Tonight. My house. I can't. You can, I snapped. Because if you don't, I'll call the number you've been harassing for years and let your father know it's time to come home. And I'll make damn sure the police hear the voicemails. The line went dead. Good. That meant I'd struck the vein. That evening Tyler showed up. No Nora, no kids. Just him standing on my porch like a boy caught sneaking cigarettes behind the garage. His hair was thinner, his face worn. But his eyes, those were the same ones that used to beg me for candy money. Only now they were hard, calculating. Mom, he said flatly. Tyler. I stepped aside. Come in. Don't worry, no one here but me. And I'm not armed yet. He flinched. I led him into the kitchen, poured coffee, black and scalding. I pushed a mug across the table. Drink. You'll need it. He didn't touch it. You found him, didn't you? I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. Why, Tyler? Why did you threaten your own father? Why force him into hiding? He shifted, jaw tight. Because he lied to us. Both of you did. He had money stashed away. Millions. And what did we get? Hand-me-downs and lectures about hard work while he played banker with a fortune. Fortune. My voice cut like a whip. Boy, the only fortune your father ever handled was keeping the lights on and food on the table. That money, if it exists, was meant for us all. But you turned it into a weapon. His face twisted. I did what I had to. Nora and I. I slammed my hand on the table, hard enough to rattle the mugs. Don't you dare blame Nora. Don't you dare drag anyone else into your cowardice. You wanted control. You wanted to cut your own mother out of her home, her life, because you were greedy. He finally touched the mug, fingers trembling. I thought. No, I snapped. You didn't think. You schemed. And here's the part you didn't count on. I don't break Tyler. You should know that by now. He swallowed, eyes darting. What are you going to do? I stood tall, every inch of me crackling with fire. I'm going to tell your daughters the truth. I'm going to show them who their father really is. And then, Tyler, you're going to live with that. Because I don't need to ruin you. You'll ruin yourself. His face went pale as the porcelain in my cupboard. Mom, please. Don't beg, I said coldly. You lost that privilege when you threw me out with 2 t-shirts and a Bible. Rafe appeared in the doorway then, arms folded, watching. Tyler's eyes flicked to him, panic rising. You've got a week, I told my son. A week to decide whether you want to keep circling the drain or climb out of it. After that, I start making calls. I opened the door. Now get out of my house. He stumbled into the night, a shadow swallowed by shadows. I leaned against the doorframe, breath heavy. Rafe touched my shoulder lightly. You think he'll straighten up? I shook my head. No, but I think he'll slip. And when he does, I'll be ready. Because now I wasn't just a mother. I was the storm he'd never see coming. For the next week, my house felt like a stage set before the curtain rises, quiet but charged with waiting. I went about my business, tending to clients' winter gardens, teaching Maddie and June how to coax lemon blossoms from stubborn trees, and baking pies that filled the kitchen with cinnamon and butter. Outwardly, I was calm. Inside, I was a storm sharpening its lightning. Tyler didn't call. Didn't visit. Not a word. That silence told me more than words ever could. He was plotting. The boy had inherited Henry's cleverness but none of his conscience. On the 7th day, the very deadline I'd given him, a car pulled up. Not Tyler's. Nora's. She stepped out in a coat too thin for the cold, her lipstick perfect, her eyes wild. Dorothy, she said, voice brittle. We need to talk. I leaned against the porch column, arms folded. You've got 5 minutes. She wrung her hands. Tyler's in trouble. Real trouble. Loans, business deals gone bad. He thought he could fix it, but now... She trailed off, swallowing. Now what? Now people are looking for him. Dangerous people. He says you're the only one who can help. I laughed, sharp as shattered glass. Funny. I don't recall him thinking I was useful when he tossed me into a motel with rat poison air freshener. Please, she whispered. For the first time in all the years I'd known Nora, she looked small. If not for him, then for the girls. The girls. Always the soft spot. I sighed, then straightened. Come in. But know this, I'll help my granddaughters. I won't lift a finger to save Tyler from the mess he brewed. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured her coffee, though she only held the mug like it was an anchor. She spilled the whole story. Shady partners, money lost, threats made. Tyler had gambled not just with cash, but with his family's safety. When she finished, I stood. I'll protect the girls, I said firmly. But Tyler? He's going to face the consequences. You can tell him I said that. Her lip trembled. He'll hate you. I smiled fierce. He already does. And yet, I'm still standing. That night my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I nearly dropped it. Henry. But when I pressed play, the voice wasn't his. It was low, unfamiliar. Mrs. Rhodes? Your son owes us. If he doesn't pay, you'll be next. I froze, heart slamming. Rafe across the room saw my face and snatched the phone. He replayed the message, his jaw tightening. They're dragging you into this, he growled. Let them, I said, surprising even myself. I've been broke, I've been homeless, I've been betrayed by my own children. What more can they take? Rafe looked at me, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. So what's the plan? The plan, I said, fire steady in my chest, is to stop waiting for men to save me. Henry hid. Tyler schemed. These loan sharks think I'm prey. I squared my shoulders. It's time they all learned I'm the hunter. Rafe grinned. Now that's the Dorothy I know. The next morning I called the number back. A man answered, voice smooth as oil. Mrs. Rhodes. Yes, I said. Let's meet. Tonight. My place. If you want what Tyler owes, you'll come look me in the eye. He chuckled. You're braver than your son. No, I said coldly. Just smarter. When I hung up, my pulse thundered. but I felt alive in a way grief had never allowed. Tonight the wolves would come to my door. And tonight, they'd learn this old woman still had teeth. The evening settled heavy on my house, shadows stretching long across the porch. I'd baked bread that morning just to calm my nerves, and the yeasty smell still lingered in the air like a reminder of simpler times. But there was nothing simple about what was coming. Rafe checked the locks on the windows, his boots heavy on the hardwood. "They'll try to scare you," he said. "That's their game." I set a knife on the counter. Not a kitchen knife. A hunting blade Henry had once used to gut fish. "Then I'll scare them right back." At 8 sharp, headlights swept across the front yard. A black SUV. Predictable. Wolves always think black paint makes them invisible. 2 men got out, broad-shouldered, wearing the kind of smugness you can smell from the porch. I opened the door before they could knock. "Evening, gentlemen," I said. "Hope you like coffee. It's fresh." They glanced at each other, thrown off balance. That's the trick, you see, meet wolves with hospitality. Nothing rattles them more. Inside, they sat stiff at my table, mugs steaming before them. Rafe leaned in the doorway, silent, arms crossed. The taller one finally spoke. "Your son owes us 50 grand. He doesn't pay, we start collecting elsewhere. That means you." I smiled. "Let me tell you a story." They blinked. Men like this don't expect stories. They expect tears. "For years ago," I began, "my children threw me out of my own house, sold it behind my back. I lived in a hotel room that smelled like poison. I started over with nothing but 2 hands in spite. Now," I leaned forward, my eyes hard, "now I own more than they ever dreamed of. And you think I'm going to hand over what I built because my son owes you?" The shorter one sneered. "Lady, this isn't a negotiation." "Oh, but it is," I said sweetly. I pulled Henry's notebook from the counter, the one filled with account numbers. I slid a photocopy across the table. "That's what you really want. Money. Not Tyler. Not me. You want something solid." They scanned the paper, frowns deepening. "What's this?" "Insurance," I said. "Funds your kind of people would kill for. You let my family be, I'll give you access. You threaten me again, I burn every page and scatter the ashes." The room went still. They weren't sure if I was bluffing. I wasn't. The tall one leaned back, studying me. Finally, he chuckled. "You've got more steel than your son." "Of course I do," I said. "I raised him. Shame he never learned it." They stood, leaving the paper behind. "We'll be in touch." "Do," I said, walking them to the door. "But remember, wolves who bite me don't live long." When their SUV disappeared down the road, I sagged against the doorframe, breath shaking. Rafe came to my side, hand steady on my shoulder. "You just stared down sharks with nothing but coffee and guts." I smiled, weary but fierce. "And bread," I added. Never underestimate the smell of fresh bread. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Henry's voice. "That they know. I saw them. You're in danger. Please run." I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the ocean of static around his words. Run? After everything I'd built? No. I looked at the garden outside, the lemon tree glowing under the porch light. I thought of Maddie and June, of the truth I'd promised to show them. I wasn't running. If Henry wanted me safe, he should have stayed. If Tyler wanted me broken, he should have finished the job years ago. This was my home now. My empire. And I'd defend it, teeth bared, until the last petal fell. I didn't sleep after that message. I sat upright in my chair by the window, shotgun across my lap, eyes on the driveway like a sentry. Rafe dozed in the next room, but me? I was wired on adrenaline and fury. Henry's warning looped in my mind, run, run, run. Run. After I'd spent 4 years clawing my way back? Not a chance in hell. At dawn, I brewed coffee strong enough to peel paint and called Nora. She answered on the second ring, groggy. "It's Dorothy," I said. "Pack the girls' things. They're coming to stay with me for a while." "What?" "Tyler. Tyler doesn't get a vote. If you love those girls, you'll drive them over by noon." She hesitated. "He's been erratic, angry. I'm scared." I softened just enough. "Then trust me. I won't let him touch them. Not now, not ever." By noon, Nora's minivan pulled up. Doors flung open like wings. Maddie and June tumbled out, backpacks in hand, eyes wide but hopeful. I swept them into my arms, breathing in their little kid shampoo smell. That right there, that was worth every battle scar. Nora lingered on the porch, wringing her hands. Dorothy, he's going to come after you. He'll say you turned them against him. I locked eyes with her. No. He did that himself. The house came alive with the girls. Laughter ricocheted off the walls, crayons scattered across my table, little socks abandoned in corners. It was chaos, yes, but it was the right kind of chaos, the kind that makes a house breathe again. That evening, as I tucked them into bed, Maddie whispered, "Grandma, are we safe here?" I kissed her forehead. "Safe as sunflowers in July, sweetheart. Go to sleep." But when I closed their door, my smile dropped. Because I knew safety was a fragile thing. 2 nights later, Tyler came. Not sneaking, not hiding. He marched up the driveway in the dark like a man storming a castle. He pounded on the door until the glass rattled. "Mom, open up." I swung it wide before he could break it down. "Keep your voice down," I hissed. "Your daughters are asleep." His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "You stole them from me." I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. "I saved them. From you." "You don't understand." His voice cracked. "Those men, you don't know what they'll do if I don't pay." "Oh, I know exactly," I said coldly. "They already came, sat at my table, drank my coffee. And you know what, Tyler? They respected me more in 10 minutes than you've managed in 38 years. He staggered back like I'd slapped him. "Mom, I was just trying to." "Don't say protect. Don't you dare." My voice shook the night. "You threatened your father. You sold my house. You tossed me out like garbage. And now you want sympathy?" His face twisted, half shame, half fury. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." I cut him off. "You meant every word. You thought I'd crumble. But I didn't." I rose. "Higher than you'll ever reach." His shoulders slumped, the fight leaking out of him. "So what now?" he whispered. "Now." I leaned in close, my eyes hard as steel. "Now you go home. You face those men yourself. And when your daughters ask why you're not around, I'll tell them the truth, that you broke what you were given." He stood frozen, breath ragged. Then he turned and walked back to his car, headlights flaring before he disappeared into the night. I stood there long after, the cold biting my skin, the silence ringing. Inside, Rafe emerged from the shadows. "That took guts," he said softly. I shrugged. Motherhood always does. The next morning my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. But this time when I pressed play it wasn't static. It was Henry's voice. Clear. Urgent. "They're on to me. If you want the truth, if you want me back, come now. Don't wait." And just like that, the storm wasn't over. It was only shifting direction. Henry's voice on the line, clear, urgent, felt like an open invitation and a dare all at once. "Come now. Don't wait." So I didn't. I phoned Rafe, who was already half packed, as if I'd said, "Pack your boots or pack it in." Within 48 hours we were airborne again, me with my sensible boots and a carry-on full of things that matter. A change of socks, my good reading glasses, a pen, and the battered little Bible that had been in my suitcase since the hotel days. The flight to the west coast of Mexico felt shorter this time, or maybe I was simply sharper. I had learned to travel with purpose. Purpose makes waiting rooms feel smaller. Rafe and I landed and drove along the coast in silence for a while, the kind of companionable quiet that comes when plans are being made in the back of the mind. At night I called Henry on the burner he'd left alive. His answers were short, keyed to safety. "Meet me at the latrine behind the fishing co-op after dusk," he said once, as if we were secret agents in a cheap thriller. I want to pause here and say this. Meeting a man who faked his death behind a public bathroom in a harbor town? Not on my bucket list. But then, neither was being homeless, and I survived that. So I walked into the dusk like I owned it. The co-op smelled of diesel and fried fish. I saw Henry before he saw me, leaning against a post, hat in hand, the same stubborn set to his shoulders that had once fixed our leaky faucet at 2 in the morning. He looked smaller in the flesh than in my nightmares and bigger than the man in my voicemail, all at once. He said, and his voice broke in the way that makes you realize the person in front of you wore a whole country's worth of regrets. We didn't hug for a long time. There were too many things to say and only a narrow street full of fishermen to eavesdrop. I took his face in my hands the way I had as a girl bandaging skinned knees. You owe me an explanation, Henry. And a very long apology. He started at the beginning, the full, ugly human story. Tyler hadn't simply stumbled on something. He discovered paper trails, transactions moved to offshore accounts Henry set up long ago during a panic over investments and greedy advisors. Henry confessed he'd been naive and then fearful, that the money had always been meant as a safeguard, not a prize to be fought over. When Tyler saw a pattern of transfers, small, deliberate, he'd taken it as proof of deception and demanded control. And when threats came, threats that Henry swore had been explicit, he fled, thinking his absence would calm the storm. He'd been a coward and a protector in the same breath, and the two had strangled him. You left me with nothing but a voicemail, I said. I don't think I wanted an excuse. I wanted him to understand the magnitude of what his absence had cost me. He nodded, shame like salt on his lips. I should have come to you. I thought if I disappeared long enough, they'd spend what they wanted and move on. I was wrong. I terrified you. His hand trembled when he reached for mine. I'm so sorry. Apologies are pretty things. They're nicer when they come with truth. He gave me both and a map. He'd kept evidence, not cash but records. He'd been saving so he could return with proof. Proof that the accounts were protection, not plunder, and proof of who had forced his hand. He'd scanned invoices and threatening messages and stored them in a hide that only made sense to a man who'd thought in ledger books for a living. You want me to come home? He asked, the question small and huge all at once. I thought of the years in which I'd been the backbone of our family, and the months I'd been their doormat. I thought of lemon trees and winter gardens and of 2 girls who now called me Grandma without hesitation. Yes, I said finally. But not the way you think. You come home when we have a plan, not a pity party. We spent the next days building that plan. Henry would come back, discreetly, under my watch, and we'd use the documents he'd kept to show that the money had been legally shielded, that it existed to protect me and that Tyler's dealings were the reckless behavior that had invited danger. We'd go to a lawyer, my lawyer, a woman with a spine of titanium whom I'd already wired a heads-up, and we'd arrange for a mediated conversation with Tyler under legal auspices. And if negotiation failed, we had a second line, publicity. Not the social media nonsense I loathe, but a quiet, devastating dossier delivered to regulators and, to Tyler's business partners, if he moved toward violence again. We rehearsed the confrontation with the efficiency of stage actors. Rafe served as our sober-eyed bodyguard and took charge of logistics like hotel rooms and safe rooms. Henry dug up emails and threats, pieces of a puzzle that began to look less like a family tragedy than like a very bad business transaction gone criminal. But the world has a flair for irony. The morning we were ready to move, a car pulled up to the co-op. Nora was in the passenger seat, face ashen, eyes rimmed red. She'd come alone, no Tyler in sight. She climbed down and looked at me as if the whole world had turned on its head. They followed him, she said simply. They know where he goes for supplies. They think if they scare him, he'll give them what he wants. They'll hurt the girls if he doesn't pay. That twist changed the tenor of everything. This was no longer about accounting and family ego. This was about safety and survival. Whatever the lies and the money and the mistakes, my grandchildren's small, surprised faces had to be kept intact. I felt the familiar fierce bloom of grandmother warrior, that inexplicable force that will throw a body in front of a bus for a grandchild. We pivoted. The plan grew teeth. Henry agreed to come back to the States under my protection, not to stand trial for anything but to fix what he could. We called my lawyer, and she moved with a speed that made me proud and a ruthlessness that made me hungry for justice. In the meantime, Rafe worked the perimeter, finding safe houses and arranging transport that would make any dime store spy novel proud. The night we left Mexico, I stood on the little porch of Henry's shack and looked at the ocean the way you look at a long indifferent lover. You have a lot to make up for, I told him. He laughed short, wet, and folded his arms. I know. Teach me. So I taught him how to be useful in the light. Answering the hard questions, saying the hard things to our children, giving up secrets that had been kept in the name of protection. He listened like a man who wanted to be forgiven but was willing to earn it. And I realized something quiet and vital. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is a transaction you make because you'd rather keep living than keep bleeding. We flew north under clouds that looked like stitched quilts. On the plane, Henry slept with his hand wrapped around mine. I felt old and very young at once. The woman who had been buried under other people's needs and had dug herself out. The woman who could now hold a man who had been lost and maybe save him from himself. We were almost home. And that is when my phone lit up. A text from an unknown number timestamped, "Don't come alone. Meet us at the warehouse. Come now." Rafe clicked his tongue. "They're getting bolder." I pinched my own arm. This was it, the part of the story where either you get clever or you get hurt. I wasn't in the business of being hurt anymore. I straightened my spine and thought of lemon trees, and of 2 girls asleep in my house, and of the kitchen table where I had faced loan sharks with bread and laugh lines. "We meet them," I said. "But we make the rules." Rafe nodded. "And we bring witnesses." I smiled, teeth showing. "And cameras. And lawyers." The plane dipped into familiar clouds. Home was waiting, and so was the reckoning. We were not naive enough to expect apologies to fix everything. But we were old enough to know how to write the next act. The warehouse was the sort of place you could film a crime drama in. Corrugated metal walls, concrete floor. The stink of oil and old sweat clinging to the rafters. Rafe and I pulled up first, headlights sweeping across the empty lot. Henry sat in the back seat, his hands gripping his knees like he was bracing for a storm. "You don't have to come in," I told him. He shook his head. "I ran once. Not again." Rafe handed me a small recorder, sleek and black. "Everything gets taped. We don't walk in blind." I slipped it into my jacket pocket and patted it like a pistol. "Let's see if wolves still howl when you shine a light on them." Inside, 2 men waited. Loan sharks with suits that didn't fit and eyes too slick to trust. And behind them, my son, Tyler. His face pale, his shoulders hunched, his lips pressed thin. "Mom," he croaked. I held up a hand. "Save it. We're not here for reunions." One of the men stepped forward. "Mrs. Rhodes, you have something that belongs to us." I laughed. A bold, sharp laugh that cracked the air like thunder. "Oh, gentlemen, you've got this all wrong. I don't owe you a thing. My son does. And lucky for you, we came bearing gifts." I pulled out the folder, Henry's records neatly copied, sealed with my lawyer's stamp. I set it on a crate between us. "Inside, you'll find proof of every dirty threat, every unlawful demand. Along with a little bonus. This meeting is being recorded. Copies are already with my lawyer, my banker, and a local journalist who owes me a favor." Their eyes narrowed. "You think you can scare us?" I leaned in, my smile ablaze. "No. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to end you. If you walk away now, you vanish, and I'll make sure these papers gather dust. But if you touch me, my son, or my grandchildren again, you'll be headline news and the IRS will eat you alive." Silence stretched. Then slowly they backed off. Predators know when prey has turned predator. One of them spat on the floor, muttered in Spanish, and they left, their footsteps echoing like a retreating storm. The warehouse fell quiet. Tyler stared at me, his eyes wet, his face broken. "Mom." I cut him off. "Don't. You chose greed over family. You threatened your father. You abandoned me when I needed you most. And for that, Tyler, you'll live with your own choices." He dropped his gaze, shoulders trembling. "I've lost everything." I straightened, my voice hard but steady. "Not everything. You've still got 2 daughters. And if you want even a sliver of their respect, you'd better start earning it today." He nodded weakly, like a boy again. And for the first time, I felt something softer than rage stir in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest crack where it might one day grow. Weeks later, Henry came home. Not sneaking, not hiding, home. He walked through my garden, touched the lemon tree, breathed in the scent of flowers that had survived more winters than either of us deserved. The girls ran to him, their giggles bubbling like spring water. "Grandpa!" Maddie shouted, and June clung to his leg. His eyes filled, and he dropped to his knees, arms wide. I watched from the porch, arms crossed, heart steady. He had much to atone for, and I'd make sure he did. But for the first time in years, the man I buried stood alive before me. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Henry and I sat on the porch swing. He reached for my hand tentative. Do you think we can start over? I looked at him, at the man who had vanished and the man who had returned. I thought of the motel with its rat poison stench, of the gardens I'd built, of the children I'd told the truth to, of the wolves I'd sent running. I squeezed his hand. No, Henry. We don't start over. We start from here. And this time we do it my way. He laughed softly, relief spilling out of him. And for the first time in a long, long time I laughed too. The night wrapped around us warm and forgiving, and I knew whatever storm still lay ahead, I was no longer a woman who waited for life to happen. I was the woman who planted it, grew it, and pruned it to bloom exactly as she pleased. And that, my friends, is how a widow became a queen.